geoscience research. She holds a bachelor degree in earth science and she is graduated from Amity University, Haryana, and a master degree in geology from Doon University. Her work focuses on planetary geology, mass analog research, and geoscience education. She has contributed to several research projects, including serving as a science lead of MDRS Crew 292, where she studied geological similarities between Earth and Mars. She is also an active advocate for women in space science through her involvement with Women in Space South Asia. We are delighted to have her with us today. Ma'am, a warm welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much, Satvik, for a very good introduction. And I'm so happy to be part of Quantum Beta team as a collaborator. And I'm happy to introduce this 4-part series, which is a webinar series based for Earth and planetary science, where we will be diving into how universe was formed, what is the origin and evolution story of Earth, Moon, and Mars, and the India space mission for Moon and Mars, and for future space missions from ISRO, from NASA, for ESA. So I'll start my first presentation, my first webinar, that is on the origin and evolution of universe. I'll share my presentation and then I'll start.
Guys, I want to tell you, over the next 4 lectures, we will explore. Lecture 1 is about the origin of the universe and the formation of our solar system. And lecture 2 will be the revolution of Earth, its geology and physiography. And lecture 3, the moon and India's mission to the moon. And lecture 4 is about Mars and India's journey to the red planet. In this, we will learn where did we came from, how was the universe born, how did our solar system form, and among billions of planets, what makes Earth so special. And on behalf of everyone present here, I warmly welcome Ms. Bharti Sharma. And now, ma'am, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Distant astrobiological or astronomy related next time. So tell me, what was your experience? So just comment down your personal experience in the comment section and then we'll begin. Okay. So before we begin talking about planets, stars, galaxies, or even the Big Bang Theory, I want all of you to do something very simple. Okay. Imagine karo that tonight is a power cut in your city. Now you're walking outside away from the streetlights and you're standing somewhere in Ladakh, Spiti, Delhi, or any quiet village in Rajasthan. Above you see a sky filled with thousands of stars. You look up and very old question comes into your mind. Where did this all come from? Again, stars, sun, earth, these landforms, these living beings, these microbes, these bacteria, everything, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the mountains we climb, the atoms in our bodies, how did this all came into existence? So this is not a new question. Thousands of years ago, people in India or Greek philosophers or Chinese astronomers, everyone has asked this question because pehle phone nahi tha, they didn't have any books or they didn't have anything to do post, post evening. So what they used to do, they just look at up the sky and build stories around it. Ki ye kahan se aaya hoga, ye kaise hoga, and I find this very beautiful and very exciting that before we were divided by languages or countries or anything, we were united by curiosities. Okay, so as a planetary geologist, I spend a lot of time studying rocks. And you might think rocks are boring, they just sit there, but rocks are actually history books. So as a geologist studying the evolution of Earth or the evolution of universe, how I relate geology to astronomy, this is a very interesting story because a sandstone tells the story of an ancient river, a volcanic rock tells the story of a violent eruption, a meteoroid that tells the story of a birth of our solar system. So geologists often say that Earth has a memory. Rocks are the memory keepers. They store the past of the universe. So astronomers say something similar, that they believe universe also has a memory. If we learn how to read that memory, we can actually travel backward through time, not by building a time machine, but by using science. So now let me tell you something that may sound surprising. When you look at yourself, Okay, for example, you are looking at your hand and you see calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen we are breathing, or the carbon that makes up our skin or our bones. None of these elements existed when the universe first began. They had to be manufactured, and the factories that made them were stars. And this means something extraordinary. You are not separated from the universe. You are actually part of the universe. So, as Carl Sagan once said, that we are made of star stuff, or we are made of star dust. So, the atoms in our body were once inside ancient stars that lived and died billions of years ago, before the Earth even existed. So, as scientists, we can now say that this is not poetry, it is a chemistry. It is basic physics and basic geology and geology, and it is a measurable scientific fact. Now, I want you to think of the universe as a very old family album. When you look at your family photographs, you see your parents, grandparents, and perhaps great grandparents. If you keep turning the pages backwards, you discover where your family came from. Science is doing exactly the same thing. First, we find ourselves. We turn the pages of the cosmic family album, then the Earth, then the solar system, then the stars, then the first galaxies. Then eventually we reach the earliest moments of the universe itself. And that journey from today all the way back to the beginning is the story we are going to explore together. But before science had telescopes, satellites, or giant observatories, human beings explained the sky in another way. They created stories. And those stories are our next chapter. So let us travel back thousands of years and see how our ancestors imagined the birth of the universe. So long before equations and space telescopes, human imagination was our first observatory. We were looking at the sky because there were no telescope, there were no rockets, there were no universities even. There was just the sky. And every evening, people looked up and saw the same stars that we see today. Think about this for a moment. A child sitting beside the Indus River 4,000 years ago, or any shepherd in ancient Greece, or a farmer in China, or a hunter in Australia, or a tribal in United States, all of them looked at the moon and asked, "What is that? Where did it came from?" They watched the sun rise every morning and wondered, "Where does it go at night?" They saw comets, and they suddenly appear in the sky and thought, okay, is this a message or a warning or a sign? So that's why our ancient stories or some of the ancient texts revolve around how sky used to behave. If there was a thunderstorm, they will think, okay, this is a sign from the god. Or if there is a comet, they'll think, okay, this is a sign from the universe or from the god. If something bad is going to happen or something good is going to happen. So everything was related to how we are interacting with the night sky. So, human beings are natural storytellers. When we do not know the answer, we create one. This is not foolish, it is the first step toward understanding. And it is a beautiful thing about humans that we can create stories. That's why we are good at discoveries and good at innovations. So, in ancient India, the sky was not just empty space, it was alive with meaning. And the ancient philosophy of studying night sky or the sky is astronomy, and people still use it to, for fortune telling or something else. And there are some other astronomy sites in Western countries as well, where they see at the sky, or they look at the picture of the sky or snapshot of the sky when you were born, or at a time when you particularly ask a question, and they understand how the stars are behaving or how the planets are behaving, and they use it for fortune telling. So similarly, earlier also, the movement of sun, moon, and planets were carefully observed. Ancient Indian astronomers became remarkably skilled at recording celestial motions. So texts like the Surya Siddhanta contain mathematical ideas that were centuries ahead of their time. At the same time, there were philosophical ideas about cycles of creation and destruction, which was related to the ancient Hindu mythology as well. The universe was imagined as something that could be born, exist, and disappear, and then begin again. So, interestingly, modern cosmology also studies the cyclic model of the universe. But the reasons are completely different. But it reminds us that humans have long imagined that the cosmos might have a history of destruction, a history of formation. So it could be similar, but right now what we know of the cyclic nature of universe is completely different from the Hindu mythology, as of we know. So the ancient Greeks approached the problem differently. philosophers such as Aristotle believed that the heavens were perfect and unchanging. Many thought that the earth stood still at the center of the universe while everything else was moving around it. Because we are at the center, okay, we are seeing the day and night changes, we are seeing the stars are coming and going, and you can see the night sky changing from the evening to the midnight and then to the morning. So it makes sense that the ancient astronomers, specifically the Greek astronomers, thought, okay, we are at the center of the universe and everything revolves around the earth. We are at a constant fixed place. And in ancient China, astronomers made careful observations of eclipses, comets, and exploding stars. They kept records with extraordinary precision. Today, modern astronomers still use some of these when, okay, I know the answer, or okay, this is my belief. No, it always starts with investigation. First hypothesis, I do not know anything. I do not know anything about the origin of universe or the evolution of a universe, or I don't know anything. So let me look for evidence. That single change in thinking transformed human civilization. Before coming to a conclusion, they start analyzing the data, they start observing the evidences, and then come to a conclusion. And still we say, okay, we don't know that much. There's so much to know about our universe. So as a geologist, I often tell my students that rocks do not care about our opinions. Okay, a granite rock that formed 500 million years ago will not change because we have a different theory for it. Similarly, the universe does not adjust itself to fit our beliefs. It leaves clues, galaxies leave clues, stars leave clues, meteorites have clues, and so our job as a scientist to collect those clues and build the best possible explanation. So, what is the difference between a scientific theory and a story? So, a story can be beautiful, meaningful, creative, and it should touch your heart. But a scientific theory must arrive through survival testing. So, we observe some daily experiments, and then based on those observations, we make predictions. And on those predictions, we prove it by evidences. And now that is one of the greatest strengths of science. Science is not a collection of fixed answers. It is a method of getting closer to the truth. Okay. By the 20th century, scientists have developed powerful telescopes and new mathematical tools. So they began asking a bold question. We were starting from Aristotle. We were actually understanding how the universe is behaving through understanding the night sky. So we were proposing so many theories, but all these theories came into existence, or you can say we start proving them unless we had proper telescopes and our space missions. Then only we start behaving, okay, now this is true. Similarly, what happened with the Big Bang, or what happened with the black hole, we know this exists, but we did not had proof until few years ago. So several scientific ideas were proposed. Some suggested that universe had always existed. Some imagined that it repeatedly expanded and collapsed. And one idea suggested that everything began from an incredibly hot and dense state. So that idea became known as Big Bang. So universe was no longer just a subject for myths. It became a scientific puzzle, and scientists began competing to solve it. So you can say we came into the solving all these puzzles back in 19th and 20th century mainly. So now we arrive at one of the most exciting parts of science. People often think that scientists always agree with each other. That is actually not true. We grow through debates. I have proposed steady state universe theory, someone else will propose oscillating, someone else will propose Big Bang, and then someone will try to prove Big Bang with their theories or with their set of mathematical equations, and someone will try to make it down, okay, no, Big Bang is not proving that particular example or that particular evidence of universe formation or that particular hypothesis. So every time scientists are always competing with each other, they are debating with each other. That is the beauty of science. That's how we come to proper conclusions and prove theories and laws. So first idea was the steady state universe theory. Imagine you are traveling on a very long train. You look out of the window, trees pass by, villages pass by, rivers pass by. But after many hours, the view always look roughly the same. Okay, that was basic idea of the steady state universe theory. According to this model, The universe has no beginning and no end. It was always like this. It has always existed and it was always like that. There are minor changes, there are minor uh, comet explosions are happening, or some earth has been changing, or some climate has been changing, but more or less it was always like this. Galaxies move apart, but the new matter is continuously created to fill the empty spaces. So the overall appearance of the universe never changes. So that was our initial thought on the origin of universe. The next idea was the oscillating universe. So you imagine a balloon, you blow air into it, it expands, then you let air out. It shrinks and then you inflate it again. Okay, so expansion, contraction, expansion, and then again contraction. Okay, it's like a pendulum theory, on and off, on and off. Expand, contract, expand, contract. So some scientists wondered if the universe behaves like that. Maybe the universe expands for billions of years and then gravity pulls everything back together and everything collapses. So another universe began. So this is a never-ending cycle of cosmic birth and death that was similar to Hindu mythology, and are similar daily life things like day and night, summer and monsoon, seasonal changes, creation and destruction. So oscillating universe is a scientific idea, not a religious one, but the image of repeating cosmic cycle is something many cultures have imagined in their text. So even today, some modern cosmologists continue to explore versions of cyclic universe. It is still debated. We don't know that uh, oscillating universe theory is false or not, because scientists are still debating about it. We are proposing new theories and proposing new calculations and proposing new evidences. So it is still debated. But as of now, we have not accepted it fully. Okay. The third idea is the Big Bang, which is the most common and most believed and most postulated idea. So let us consider a very different possibility. What if the universe was once much smaller, very hot, very dense? And what if space itself begins expanding from the early state? So that is what we call as the Big Bang model. This is a modern misunderstanding I want to clear up. Many people imagine that Big Bang was a giant bomb exploding somewhere in empty space. It was not like that. So, if you want to explain, understand it in a very daily life example, so understand if you are kneading a dough, okay, and you mix some raisins or some sesame seeds in the dough. Now the raisins are not flying through the dough, okay. The dough itself is expanding. Similar, galaxies are simply flying through space, okay. Space itself is expanding, but not that particular dot in that space. So, example, you are kneading a dough, you add some sesame seed in the dry flour, okay, and then you add water and you start kneading it. Now, these sesame seeds will bind to the dough. So, whatever was happening in the Big Bang, we say, was happening to that sesame seed itself, and it was changing the the mold or the dough completely, but not like the overall uh, uh, shape of the universe, but it was happening inside it only at the sesame seed level. So, example, you are watching a movie of glass falling from a table and breaking into pieces. If I play the movie backwards, what happens? The broken piece come together, the glass becomes whole again. So scientists did something very similar. They looked at galaxies moving apart. Then they asked, what happens if we mentally run the universe backward? Okay, why we are saying that the universe was expanding, or why we say that galaxies were moving apart, that comes from a redshift theory. I will not go deep into it, but what we see, I'll just explain it in a very brief way. So when we look at the sky, the night sky, and the distant galaxies, we see a red light color. Okay, and from our understanding of electromagnetic spectrum, we know that red light tells us that it is from far away, and blue light tells us it is very near to us. So those distant light, when it appears as red color, we understand, okay, this is from the very end and it is going away from us. It is not coming towards us, but it is going away from us. So similarly, scientists did what they tied the whole theory together. Okay, if the galaxies are moving apart, what if they were somewhere close? Okay, so galaxies become closer, and eventually everything reaches an incredibly hot and dense state. So this idea became the foundation of the Big Bang theory. That somewhere in time, back in time, everything was closed and everything was very dense and everything was very hot. then something happened, an explosion happened or something happened, and then they started moving away from each other and the universe started cooling. So scientific theory is just an idea, it must pass the test. Okay, so if the Big Bang happened, what should we observe today? So galaxies should be moving apart, which I explained that through redshift theory. It is evident that galaxies are moving to apart from us, and there should be an ancient heat left over from the early universe, because right now we are in a cooling state of the universe, though it is still very hot, but still it is a cooling stage of the universe. The amounts of hydrogen and helium match the calculations which we did for the combined universe. Okay, so over the next few decades, mainly in the early 20th century, astronomers found out that the answers to all three questions was actually yes. The evidence began to favor the Big Bang. So that's why Big Bang is widely accepted, and we are understanding universe based on the Big Bang theory. So we have examined the competing ideas. Now let us travel back to 13.8 billion years ago when it all started. So now we are about to travel farther back in time that no human has ever traveled. I mean, no spaceship has ever traveled. So Big Bang was not just an explosion in space; it was the beginning of the expansion of space itself. Okay, though that sound confusing, so we'll build it step by step. So imagine that door again. Okay, now. So the perfectly acceptable in science is that the Doe model or the other theories we do it with the light. So we do not have enough evidence to prove it, but our current laws state that Big Bang is the proven one. So it did not. What we know about Big Bang is that it did not happen at a one special place. Okay, it happened at a we don't know the geographical location of where exactly the Big Bang happened, and sometimes we say it happened everywhere. So that sesame seed in the dough, you can say when you are molding the dough, the sesame seeds are moving along with your, with the movements of kneading the dough. But the dough is itself in a particular shape. You are changing it, you are molding it, but you are not adding another mass to it. Okay. So no another mass was being added to the universe. It was not changing somewhere. So whatever is happening in between your hands, and you are just molding it, and then you are understanding, okay, where the sesame seeds are going. Or so that was our basic idea, that's how the Big Bang was happening. So as a planetary geologist, I often compare this to study a mountain. So when we say the formation of the Himalayas, we see folded rocks. Okay, we see rocks are preserving evidence, but we don't know exactly, okay, this was the point where the Eurasian plate, so we know the Himalayas, exactly the whole chain of Himalayas was the point where the Eurasian and the Indian plate was collided. Okay, so that's a very long stretch. When you compare it at the universe level, so that was the stage of the Big Bang. We don't know exactly how much kilometer or how much meter was that Big Bang explosion happened, but we know that it happened somewhere and it happened in the universe itself. So we are still understanding universe and we are still understanding how Big Bang happened, but that's a very good question for your future PhD if you are going into astronomy. But what we know about Big Bang is, so when was Big Bang happening? There were no stars, there were no planets, there were no galaxies, no Earth, no Moon, no people. Okay, but there was intense pressure, there was intense heat, which was making that event possible, and eventually two elements formed: hydrogen and helium. And our sun is made of hydrogen and helium. Okay, but now what is happening is that the as we move away from Big Bang, okay, Big Bang happened for first few seconds, and then we move towards another few seconds, and hydrogen and helium are there, and then we move towards other seconds. Then the heat started coming to a lower point, and the universe started cooling. So when it started cooling, everything started to change. It allowed particles to combine, it allowed matters to form, it eventually made stars and planets possible. But during those initial time period of Big Bang, no planet, no elements was there, only heat and some energy was there. Okay. So if the entire 13 billions of year history of the universe were compressed into one calendar year, the Big Bang would happen on January 1st. The solar system was started forming or formed around early September, and dinosaur would appear around Christmas, and we are just few minutes before the midnight of December 31. Okay, so we are very small when it comes to the 13.8 billions of history, and formation of our solar system is also very less, because if January 1 is the event of Big Bang, and in September or in October we are having our solar systems, and we are very small. So universe has begun, space is expanding, temperature is falling, the first ingredients of everything around us about to appear. Okay, right now we don't have any element because atoms are not forming. So now we are standing at one of the most remarkable moments in the history of the universe, the earliest moments of Earth. Okay, Big Bang has happened, universe is expanding. Okay, first few seconds, consider we are in June and July of the universe calendar, and universe is about to cool. Okay, it is expanding and it is also cooling. So because of cooling down of the universe, some what actually happened, so I'll give you a daily life analogy for this. Consider you are cooking something in a sugary syrup. Okay, any sweet dish you are cooking in a sugary syrup, when it is extremely hot, everything is moving around rapidly. When you boil water and add sugar in it, everything is very fast moving, and you stir it, everything is fast moving, and no substitutes are forming. But as it cools down, the syrup changes its behaviors. Okay, structure becomes possible, it becomes slimy, or becomes thick. So early universe worked in a somewhat in a similar way. When it was very hot, when it was very moving, every particle, or you can say every, the smallest size of our atom or nuclear, protons or electrons, they were moving in a very haphazard motion and away from each other, that nothing was settling. But as it started to expand, it started to cool down, the matter start forming. Okay, so as it cooled, nature slowly began building the first pieces of the cosmic puzzle. Universe is smaller than we can imagine and hotter than the center of any star. So temperature is so high that the ordinary atoms cannot survive. Instead, space is filled with pure energy and tiny fundamental particles. So you may have heard electrons, quarks, and neutrons. Quarks must be a new term for all of you, so it's very BSc or MSc level physics. I'll explain it into my next few webinars, where we are talking more about how this will understand us in future space missions. So these electrons, these neutrons, these protons were the alphabet of the universe. Okay, just as millions of words can be formed from these alphabets, similarly, more elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, all these can be formed through these electrons and neutrons and protons and quarks. Okay, so earlier we had only hydrogen and helium. Okay, now tiny amount of lithium is also produced. Why hydrogen, lithium, hydrogen, then helium, and then lithium? Well, you will understand this from your 9th standards periodic table. How the elements are arranged, that's how the universe started making elements. Okay, hydrogen, helium, lithium, then oxygen, then carbons, and then nitrogen, and the p block elements, and the inert gases and everything. Okay, so everything formed in a structure. That's why it was easy, not very easy at that time, but that's how chemists used to measure the elements, so they know what will come after what, and they left some spaces behind to for other chemists to fill the periodic table. So that's the story of our universe. So, but still there was no oxygen, no carbon, and no iron, no gold. Universe was very simple, and their early elements, hydrogen and helium mainly, some part of it was lithium. So if the universe was only made of hydrogen, helium, so all these, how does it came from, which I explained to you once the universe started cooling, and the matter was coming into picture, because all these electrons and neutrons were combining to each other and forming new minerals and new elements. That's how we were finding our basic stars, Okay, usually stars have hydrogen and helium mainly, but then some other elements start forming into it because they are very hot. But once the start dying, then it starts making more elements as well. So, uh, light itself was trapped in the early universe. Uh, Consider you are driving in Delhi winter fog. Okay, you switch on the headlights, but the light scatters everywhere. You cannot see very far away from your headlight. So early universe was more crowded than this. You cannot see actually what was happening in the universe. It was surrounded by dust clouds only. Okay, so light kept colliding with tiny charged particles and we could not travel freely. So in a sense, the universe was wrapped in a very glowing fog. There were no clear views, no visible stars, no galaxies, only a brilliant opaque cosmic dust. Okay. So universe started to cool, something magical happened. Electrons finally slowed down. Okay. For example, if the light is trapped in some way, okay, what is light? It's a charged particle only, na? So they were also forming matter. So when this dust mist or cloud dust was there, light could not travel much. So complete atoms could only form on those dust clouds. Okay. When that happened, light was finally free to travel across the universe. Some of that ancient light is still traveling through space today. That is what we call as cosmic microwave background, which we study through Hubble telescope and other giant observatories. And we understand what was actually happening, what this light is telling us, or what is the age of this light, or where it is actually coming from. So, reading those cosmic microwave background tell us the origin and evolution of Big Bang and origin and evolution of our distant galaxies and the universe as well. It's like a baby photograph of the cosmos. Okay, and now we know universe has expanded. Okay, Big Bang happened on January 1st, and then universe started expanding. Universe started to cool down, and then all these electrons and neutrons started to combine and started forming molecules, and then the whole periodic table was somewhere complete in those time, and then we started having our formation of our solar system. Okay, and similarly all these atoms are combining. Okay, and then in the universe itself our atoms were combining and forming somewhere close to the sun, were forming rocky planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth and Moon. And then away from the sun there were giant dust clouds like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. So now universe is getting lit up. Up to this point in our story, universe was actually very quiet place. It was not quiet in terms of okay, no, nothing was happening, but it was quiet in terms of sound. So there were atoms, there was hydrogen, there was helium, some amount of lithium and all. Ancient light was also traveling now, but there was no shine in the stars. There was still darkness in this universe. So and what we know is that the first stars ignite 200 million years after the Big Bang. The cosmic dark ages finally ended. And then galaxies are born after that. And then stars create heavy elements. So this started happening around August and July, you can say, before the formation of our solar system. I have to rush up the PPT because it's already, I have, actually taken a lot of time. Okay, so what we say when we see ourselves, and many philosophers have said that you are part of the universe. You are actually part of the universe. So this carbon, this oxygen, this iron, this gold, this every element we are made of is actually part of the early universe. And when it all started, forming, we are. If we are studying humans, we are studying what elements are in our body. We are understanding universe as well. Whatever elements are present in the rocks, we are understanding, because rocks, us, bacteria, microbes, clouds, any landform or any living being in this universe is part of that universe, early universe itself. So understanding this universe or understanding our own Earth make us understand what is happening on Moon, what is happening on Mars, what is happening on Venus, or what is happening in our distant galaxies. Because the process is similar everywhere. The element formation is similar. So captain and understand how universe are forming, what is the sequence of those elements. So yeah, we are all part of stardust. So birth of our cosmic home was a giant molecular cloud, and then which was very vast cold hydrogen cloud, and it started to begin collapse. And then we had our rotating disk. Cloud flattens and spins. Sun ignites at the center. If you can look at into this picture, this was more of a rotating disk. Okay. So what was happening? Those hydrogen and helium were making a giant sun together. Okay, and then all the other elements or small hydrogen and helium atoms and other molecules were rotating around it. Okay, now this cloud flattens and spins, and sun ignites at the center, and then slowly heavier elements stick close to the sun, and then lighter elements goes beyond from the sun. So Mercury is the heaviest, then the Venus, then the Earth, then the Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and other dwarf planets. Okay. Now these planetesimals started forming, basically, which were dust clumps into rocks, collisions from protoplanets. Earth was also a protoplanet sometime, some in this beginning, and then it became into a rocky planet, and then it started having its own atmosphere and everything, which will the formation of Earth we will deal into the next chapter, that next webinar that is going to happen next Saturday, and then this whole inner rocky planets and gas giants form, and that's how our solar system came into place. So how Earth became our home? Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. Solar system and the formation of Earth began 4.6 billion years ago. Okay, Earth forms a molten, violent, airless world became. So initially it was just the magma and lava only. Okay, it was a molten, rocky planet where it was just the lava and the. You can actually imagine how it was like this. Okay, similar to the picture. Then we had our moon formations. So what happened with the moon is that we know there was a giant impact with the Earth. A Mars-like comet or Mars-like planetesimal collided with Earth, which was called Theia, and it took moon away from the surface of the Earth. So the surface of, or the composition of moon is actually the surface features of the Earth. So whatever is on the crust of the Earth is on the crust of the moon as well. So we share the similar DNA. It is formed from the Earth only. And then 4.1 billion years ago, oceans appear. Asteroid impacts happened. Asteroid impact started to happen, and if you know that moon is still having those bombardments, but in earlier times, because it was the early time of our solar system, bombardments were very common. That's how we believe that the ancient water has come from, or the ancient life has come from the meteoroids or from these bombardments as well, because they contain amino acids, which is the building block of our protein, the building block of our human body. And there were some H2O as well, but there are different theories. Sometimes we say, okay, the atmosphere cooled down and it was enough time to make hydrogen and oxygen to combine and form water molecule, and some say that it has been brought up by the meteorite impacts. So we are still debating about it. Once we prove it, then only we can say, okay, this one is correct. But we propose both the theories, and we are taking both the theories into place. So 4.1 billion years ago, oceans appear, asteroid impacts deliver water ice, and volcanoes release gases, Earth's blue ocean forms, and then 3.8 billion years ago, life begins. So first simple microbes appear in the warm, chemical-rich oceans, and the journey of life starts. Because of this, the 3.8 billion years ago, we know that the simple microbes appear in the warm and chemical-rich oceans, okay, which is similar to the Venus, okay, and the early life of Earth was similar to what we have on Venus now. So that's why we can say, okay, some part of Earth can be a good analog to understand Venus. We, for sure, we are not going to settle on Venus. We don't consider it as our habitable planet. but we can understand how life is evolving over there, and it may help us to understand how life evolved on Earth, because we know it from the foundational observations. Okay, this was happening, but to understand it in a very detailed manner, we need to understand it in a very practical laboratory, and Venus provides us that. And some theories suggest that Venus might reach a point where it behave like Earth, or it might not, but they're always two theories. And some places often mimic the Moon or the Mars, and we understand how microbes or how these bacteria are forming in those environments, and that's how we study astrobiology for Moon and Mars. So studying these environments which mimic early Earth, or which mimic the Mars or Moon or Venus, we understand how life is behaving, because now we have established that us as the chemical or the stardust as part of the universe. So every microbe or every landform is part of the microbe itself. Whatever is happening on Earth will happen on Moon, Mars, Venus, or any distant galaxy. So that's why some theories are there that we might have a second Earth in some distant galaxies, or there are then theories of parallel universe, because these are all theories, none has been proven yet. But this all comes from this basic idea: if we are part of the universe and we are behaving like that, and it's not very uncommon to have someone similar like us in some distant galaxy. If not similar to us, they might be advanced to us, they might be lower to us, like in terms of species built up. So that's how we study our universe. This is a very foundational course for all of you. This was very an overview course. We want to dive deeper into it, but it will take another 4 to 5 lectures on just the observation or the formation or the origin of universe. So we have kept it a very surface level story so that you get an idea of it. Okay, I'm open to take any questions. We know now is that before the Big Bang, there was just heat and energy and some dust clouds. Okay, when we say that universe is formed of dark matter, so that was initial dark matter, which was okay. Okay, sorry. So it was just dark matter. There were dust clouds in there, and this Big Bang happened maybe because of some other passing by of another galaxy or another universe. We don't know why this Big Bang happened, but before Big Bang, we know there were dust clouds, there was dark matter mostly, and there was heat and energy.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, Khushi.
Sorry. And one more question. You said that dwarf planets, like our solar system was aligned in some way that the Mars planet uh, was there with the sun, but far away was the dwarf planets. So why is Jupiter placed in such, like, in the middle of our solar system? Like,
Okay, I understand the last part, but your voice was not clear. So correct me if I didn't get your question correctly. You asked why we have a differentiation of planets, like why dwarf planets are away from universe, away from the sun, and why the Mercury, Venus, or Earth are closer to the sun, right?
yes,
Or
ma'am,
was it
yes,
okay? So this happened because of the differentiation process. Okay, heavier elements stick to the, so okay, we'll go to the basics. The center of gravitation, okay, the solar system gravitation is stored in sun, right? Heavier elements will stick to closer to the sun, right?
yes, ma'am.
For that, understand how the earth has formed. Earth के core में, the core has the iron and nickel, Nife. Okay, it is closer to the center of the earth. So similarly, heavier elements will always stick to closer to the center of the gravitational point. So that was sun. So all these heavier elements or the rocky planets were forming close to the sun, and as we go distant from the sun, the lighter elements will form. Gaseous planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune are all lighter elements. Okay, only the gaseous elements. So that's why they were forming away from Earth, away from the sun. And then we have the dwarf planets, which are again gaseous, but the concentration or the size of those planets are very small. Okay, and they do not follow, because they are very farther away from the sun, they do not follow the particular elliptical order which all our other eight planets form. So that's why they are called dwarf planets. They are called like incomplete planets, you can say. So because of their lighter elements, and their lighter elements is because of their vast distance from the sun, and they are forming there, and they are not following the trajectory which other planets are forming because of the distance, and the lighter elements are getting settled away from the sun. Okay, it is all because of the gravitational force. I'll deal into this in the next webinar when I'm telling you how the differentiation of elements work and the centripetal and centrifugal force.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, welcome.
The next question is, how do the volcanic eruptions on Earth affect the atmosphere and climate, and could similar process occur on other planets?
Yes. So when these volcanic eruptions are having, whatever the gases or whatever the elements are in the volcanoes, okay, in the magma, they are erupting. They are coming out in the atmosphere. So some will settle on the floor, so they will form rocks, and others will go as the dust clouds, and they will mix with the atmosphere, and they will form clouds. Okay, and then some will go away. So when these heavy elements are forming a thick cloud in the atmosphere, they are trapping the heat there, they are trapping the water molecules are there. So that's how they are forming the atmosphere, they are forming the igneous rocks, the volcanic rocks, and they are supporting a environment where life can grow. As I mentioned in the PPT, that some microbes or the early microbes flourish in that heated environment. So similar things are happening on Venus, and similar things are happening on other distant galaxies as well. Okay, but our close neighbor is Venus, where these thick clouds are there, and the clouds are so thick that you as humans we cannot survive over there. So the temperature is very high, the hottest planet is Venus, and they are forming a very thick clouds, and always there is a eruption happening. And similar eruptions happened on Mars as well. Mars is quite active, was quite active in the volcanic eruptions. And if anybody has been to Maharashtra, we see Deccan Traps. Okay, so there you see basaltic rock, red color rock. So what we know, the formation of Deccan Traps is the Indian plate was moving towards the Eurasia, and came a point when the hot plume erupted. Okay, and it spread on the Indian plate like a flood basalt, like flood was coming and then it's spread over there. So that's how our Deccan Traps were formed. It was like a very thick sheet of lava. That's how Maharashtra was formed, and many other flood plume models are forming. So similar thing happened on the Mars, but at an oceanic level scale. So Mars is complete a flood plume model, and then there were other volcanic eruptions happening. So Mars was quite active in volcanic landforms. So many eruptions were happening, and their major rock type is volcanic. And then the life form we see, not we see today, but we hypothesize or we assume that this is the life form, is similar to what we are seeing on the volcanic landforms of Earth. So analogs are Hawaiian Islands. Whatever life form we are finding on Hawaii, or whatever life forms we are finding in Ladakh, we see, okay, maybe this could be similar to what we are seeing over there, or what might we see over there. So that's why for astrobiological study, we understand landscape or volcanic areas, Iceland, Hawaiian Islands, Ladakh, or Antarctica and Arctic regions. So yes, volcanic eruptions happen everywhere on every rocky planet. On Venus it is happening, on Mars it has happened, and it has shaped the entire planet. On Earth it has happened, and it is still there. We still have active volcanoes, and it will, the major role play for volcanic eruptions is formation of the atmosphere. So earlier it was just a molten gas, but once we start having those eruptions more and more, because what will happen, it was molten planet. Okay, lava was erupting, magma was erupting, then there will come a time when all this will cool down, then another eruption will happen. So before the another eruption and after that initial eruption, there is a cooling period when the rocks are forming. because lava is cooling down on the surface, so rocks are forming, and then another eruption is happening. So over a period of time, thick clouds will form close to the Earth, and that's how our atmosphere was evolved. And similarly, atmospheres of Mars and uh, Venus are evolving.
Okay. अब मैं समझ गया. Like another question is that can Mars study help us understand Earth's past and future?
Yes, definitely. So when we study Ladakh, or when we, especially Ladakh, we say Ladakh is the past window of Mars. So whatever is happening on Ladakh right now happened on Mars years ago. So the Noachian time of Mars is like the earlier periods of Mars was similar to what is current Ladakh. So by understanding Ladakh, by uh, understanding the astrobiology, or the understanding the analog sites of Ladakh, I am understanding what has already happened on Mars. So some say that if things go wrong or if things go differently, Ladakh may become like Mars, which is very a bold statement, but Ladakh is the past of Mars. So yes, we are studying the past of Mars. We don't have any current timeline analog on Earth, but whatever we have, the Hawaiian Islands, the Iceland, or the Ladakh, or the Antarctica, is all past windows of Mars.
Okay, thanks, Bharti.
Welcome.
I want to know, do you have any rock collection?
Yes, I have. I have many. Like wherever I go, I usually take so many rocks for uh, understanding the different areas. So yes, I have a good collection of rock samples.
That's fascinating.
Ma'am, you said about the volcanic activities and how they evolve at the oceanic level. They evolve the Mars. So, is it also going on in Ganymede, the Jupiter's moon, Ganymede?
Yeah, similarly, the rocky moons of Jupiter, they are having a similar landform structure, but it is still debated, because for Mars we have like much more data. We have analog sites for it, but for Ganymede or for the Europort Titan, we know that these are icy planets, but we don't know much about them yet, because we don't have any much more samples from there. We don't have any rover missions, but whatever we are assuming of them is similar to what is happening. So yeah, processes are similar, more or less similar.
Okay,
So
ma'am. Thank you.
NR Subha Reddy has asked the Big Bang Theory what to tell us, the born of Earth or to born of universe and galaxy. So it was the origin of universe. Okay, Earth formed later at later stages, but Big Bang is the formation of universe, our universe. Any more questions?
I think सबके questions हो गए हैं. So let's like wrap up the session.
Thank you. It was really nice talking to all of you. I'll be dealing with the formation and origin of Earth in my next webinar on next Saturday. So see you all there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Before we
Ma'am.
wrap up, I would just like to thank Bhati ma'am for sharing really interesting insights with us today. And guys, one small thing. Tonight, I want you all to go to your terrace, look up at the stars, and take a moment to realize that every star that you see is a part of a universe far bigger than we can imagine. Just feel the vastness, admire the infinite beauty around you, and think about how extraordinary it is that out of billions of stars and galaxies, you get to be here, witnessing it. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot for attending today's webinar and session. Stay tuned and stay curious for the next one.
Thank you.
Your certificates will be provided to your mail ID, which you have filled in the form. So, yeah, thanks for attending the webinar.